Hello and welcome to Dialogue. The Tokyo Olympic Games, postponed for a year due to COVID-19, are scheduled to begin this July. But organizers insist no matter what happens with the virus between now and then, the Olympics will go ahead. In what ways has the pandemic reshaped sporting events? How should we prepare for future events? And how is technology helping sports survive during the pandemic? To talk about these issues and more, I'm joined by Yan Qiang, founder of Score Sports, Paul Dong. He is co-founder of Asia Limited. He is also certified commentator to the 2008 Olympics, and our correspondent Grace Lee in Tokyo. That's our topic. I'm Zhou Yue. Well, Japan has vowed to forge ahead with the postponed Tokyo 2020 Games this summer, despite surging COVID-19 infection rates. So I want your take on what will the 2021 Olympics look like. I want both of you to have your say on this, don't you?
Well, I think people around the world, especially those who love sports, are very supportive and kind of sympathetic with the organizing committee of the Tokyo Summer Games, despite some recent hesitation by the Japanese population. I mean, there are disagreements about what to do about this already postponed Olympics. But we have to face reality, and the pandemic is getting nowhere near, disappearance. So we need to be prepared, and we've heard some different voices already, including a former vice president of the IOC, International Olympic Committee, suggesting that the United Nations may intervene in, coming to a conclusion or deciding what to do about this upcoming summer games. Although, we have no condition to wish good luck to Tokyo.
And Yan Qiang, what is your vision of the 2021 Games?
I think if it goes ahead, everyone has to adjust their habits or the preparation for the coming Olympics, if it goes ahead. For the past half a year, or almost a year, I've been commentating on a lot of football matches and other sports events. And we've been adjusting to no attendance, no sight, in stadium audience all the time, whether it's the European League or the Chinese domestic football league. So the athletes, the organizers, the officials, and the relatively few real site attendances audience, they have to adjust lives in the bubble, regular testing, and maybe a up-to-date vaccination to face this pandemic world. Everything has already been changed, and the past ritual of attending any sport event, especially the Olympics, we will have to adapt to the new changes.
Yes, indeed. The world is different and everybody must adjust. And Grace, about the Olympics, the Japanese do not seem to share their prime minister's optimism about holding the Olympics in the summer. And the latest local media polls show that 80% of Japanese public think the Olympics either will not or should not happen. So why is the government in Japan still insisting that they must go ahead?
I guess there's
well, you're
too
right.
much at stake,
Grace,
the popularity of hosting the
Tokyo,
Olympics, the
please.
thought of it, continues to go.
Go ahead, Grace.
Oh, sorry. Yeah. So the popularity of the Olympics just continues to go down. It went from, about 60% saying, yeah, we should not hold the Olympics, to 80% now saying, no, it's just not possible. But the Olympics was a big promise from previous Prime Minister Abe, and now with new Prime Minister Yoshihide Suga, it continues to be one of his main pillars in what he wants to deliver to the Japanese public. And of course, during this fall, he will see whether or not he's reelected to that position, which is what he really wants. So, he is struggling here to try and maintain his popularity, but his popularity has already taken a big hit because of how he's been handling COVID-19 so far, taking a 20-point hit, 30-point hit in the past few weeks, just because a lot of the people here say that he's just been too slow in reacting to the pandemic and too slow in issuing the state of emergency for Tokyo and the surrounding regions. So these are all things that he'll have to continue to grapple with moving forward in the next few months.
And Yan Qiang, earlier you want to weigh in on this. You think the Japanese government has a lot of things to consider. The government's credibility,
Yes.
the safety of the athletes, and the control of this epidemic within Japan. Why they're having such a hard time making the decision? What is your advice? Yan Qiang?
I think the government has to get it go ahead, as a lot of past political promises. And they have to deliver. They have already delayed for a year. If it's not happening this year, it might never happen again in Tokyo in the foreseeable future. And secondly, I think, there are so many business and economic relationships connected, a lot of benefits at stake. They have to deliver it. And certainly, I think the world has to come to understand, this pandemic is not anything temporarily. We have to deal with this in the coming maybe 4, 5, even longer years. And so if there are things to do, we have to do it. And we just have to adapt it in a new way.
And Dongjun, do you think cancellation is not an option for Olympics?
Excuse me, what do you mean by a translation?
No, I mean cancellation of Olympics.
Oh, cancellation. Absolutely, it is an option. For anything you do, small or big, a project, you need to, have the exit mode to be on the table. Exactly, yes, absolutely. You have to be prepared for that. And I think it's almost nobody's fault, because people would say it's up to scientists, medical experts to decide last year, before summer, whether it should be completely canceled or postponed by just one more year. It was too difficult to predict about the pandemic, especially a second wave, third wave, new variants surging, and it's
So if
too
that's the
difficult.
case, it's still half a year ahead. Why the International Olympic Committee and the Japanese government insisted now that whatsoever the Olympics will go ahead?
I'm not sure that, the same time in March or April, they will still be insisting. Given the exact the particular situation with the pandemic, I'm not sure about that. But for the moment, at the moment
Okay.
now, they insist, of course.
Let's also take a look at what some of the social media users, especially those from Japan, have been saying about the upcoming Olympics and what we should do about the Olympic organization. A track driver, Hiro, I guess it must be a Japanese driver, he said, it's not just the infections in Tokyo, it's the infections in all the competing nations. The challenge is whether enough competitors in enough countries can visit Japan and make it really a viable games. The Tokyo Olympics are scheduled to open on July the 23rd. Grace, I still recall that last time when the 2020 Olympics was underway for preparation, some countries, some athletes decided to give up if they insisted on holding the Olympics in 2020. Will we see that again?
That is definitely a possibility. We are seeing cases continue to surge in the UK, which is a big player in the Olympics. And, it really took Canada and Australia both saying, no, we will not be attending the Olympics, for the Japanese Olympic Committee and for the IOC to start taking action and say, okay, then we need a plan B. And that was very late in the process. And I think that has been a bit of a setback for them in terms of how the Japanese public perceives them as well. Cases are continuing to go up in Japan. The new record for serious cases is about 1,000. That's where they're at right now. Tokyo Osaka, all the major cities are under a state of emergency at the moment, and people here are not happy about how the government has been handling COVID-19 so far. So with public support gone, and with COVID cases continuing to rise, and with a lot of important key players, including people from within Yoshihide Suga's own cabinet, saying that they don't know, they're not sure if the Olympics can go ahead. I think the future is looking more and more grim for the prospect of the Olympics.
And Grace, a lot of countries have been rolling out their vaccination programs, but IOC President Thomas Bach said athletes for Tokyo Olympics will not be required to get vaccinated before competition, although he does encourage them to do so. So if not vaccination is a must, how can we be sure that the athletes will be virus-free?
Right, and they do have plans to ensure that there are health stations and personnel on site for the Olympics to ensure the safety of athletes. But they've also said different things. The committee members of the Tokyo Olympics have said different things about athletes flying into Japan not needing to go through the procedures that everybody else has to go through right now, which is 2 weeks self-isolation, a COVID test. They say that they'll be able to use public transportation if they want. A lot of these promises are coming in, but they're not really elaborating on how they'll implement this and how this will be safe, especially as we see new variants from the UK and from Brazil here in Japan. So I think that's where a lot of the public skepticism comes as well. They are trying to speed up the vaccination process here in Japan to at least ensure that the Japanese public has their inoculations in order. But at the same time, that is very late. The end of February is when the government is aiming to start rolling out vaccinations for frontline workers, for the key important people who have health conditions. The general public will probably start getting inoculated much later than that.
And Dongjun, of course, the Olympics is a global spectacle, so we are expecting thousands of athletes, trainers, coaches to send in Japan. So the worst scenario, God forbid, if some athletes got positive and transmitted to others, will that be an Olympic that will be acceptable?
I think we have to live with reality. And what we couldn't imagine just a couple of years ago is indeed taking place in the world. So we have to face it. And there is no set model for anything, including such gigantic event like the Olympics, or many other activities, or business events. So what we are facing now is this pandemic very negatively is pushing or forcing us to do what we have been warned about for many decades, like back in the 1990s when people like Bill Gates suggest that people may consider doing business and doing their other social activities differently online and with other technologies. And now so many people have been delaying this from happening. So now we come to this stage. And we all know that the Olympic Games have been under pressure, even without the pandemic, to consider and really practice, experiment some fundamental changes because it's getting too huge in scale and size. And now we're doing this forced by the pandemic.
So Grace, some fundamental changes will probably happen if the Olympics are going to be held in Japan this year. What kind of adjustments the Japanese have been preparing for? For example, will there be audiences, spectators in the stadium? What kind of protocols will the athletes and coaches go through? What happened if somebody got tested positive? Any plans?
Well, they haven't revealed the full scale of what the Olympics will look like should they take place in Japan. But what we have been hearing from the Olympic Committee for the past few months is that this Olympics will be different. It will look different and feel different. That includes the possibility of canceling the opening and closing ceremonies. That means a lot less personnel coming here with the athletes, and it may mean that there will be a lot less spectators. The IOC has been adamant that they will not host the Olympics without spectators at all. They say that this goes against the Olympic spirit.
Right.
So they do still want people to be there to see the games in person. But it's not clear whether or not, a Japanese audience is enough for them. So we are going to expect an Olympics that will be socially distanced and have COVID measures in place. But, for the time being, they say that they're going to have more announcements on what this all means, but the public is growing more and more skeptical.
And another thing is the economic cost, Grace. The postponement of the games and the implementation of the COVID-19 control measures, of course, will cost Japan a lot of money, extra money than other hosts. So who will pay for those? Will the Japanese government suck it up?
Like it'll come from the Japanese government and the Tokyo metropolitan government. And of course, they say that they're not going to look to the IOC for more money at this time. But the total cost of the Olympics has been bumped up about 23% due to the pandemic. And it was already a pretty expensive Olympics. So now the bill is sitting at about $15 billion. And that's not really what the Japanese public wants to hear, as they've been seeing the Japanese economy kind of at its lowest in years due to the pandemic as well. And of course, a lot of companies had invested in the Olympics. They had been making merchandise, and they really thought that this was going to be a turning point for them, and now they're thinking about what happens when it's all canceled. So they really do want a notice from the Japanese government. They want to know that there is a plan B, or if they're going to cancel it, they want to know as soon as possible so that they can make the proper adjustments as well.
So Yan Qiang, this Tokyo Olympics, if it can happen at all, will be a game-changing game economically. So the broadcasters, the sponsors, all the participants will probably be thinking differently economically. Can you weigh in on this?
Yes, actually, for the past year, we have witnessed a lot of changes in the sports competition broadcasting, and also a lot of online, especially digital tools have been used now widely. For example, just like our program now, we have done it through all kinds of social media or other new technology tools, to get it done.
But sports is different.
IOC,
sports needs people to stay together, play together, have physical contact.
Exactly. There are 2 points to that. One is that, as the IOC sticks to its principle, there must be spectators inside, on the site, inside the stadiums and on the around the playing ground to create that kind of atmosphere. But I am very pessimistic about that principle. I don't think it's going to happen. It must be empty stadiums. And secondly, we're still enjoying the American basketball professional league and also all kinds of European football leagues. The sports events, especially during this kind of lockdowns, infected lifestyles, would be a dim light sport of social life, across the world. We need this kind of competition. We need to see active people, competing against each other through all kinds of sports events, to have a little bit aspiration and to grasp a bit of meaning of life through all these physical activities. That's vital to the international society.
And Dongjin, you agree? Because probably the IOC should tone down their expectations. We don't want to take too much fun out of it, but at this time, probably it makes sense to keep the stadium empty and just watch at home.
Well, I think it means tremendous work now on the shoulders of the IOC. They have so many aspects to consider, including the social impact and also a cancellation of the Olympics. What would that mean to the image of the Olympic movement? And at the same time, they have to face the financial challenges because now it looks almost set. It's very difficult for the IOC and the Tokyo organizers to make a profit. And because I think the marketing team of the IOC need to be innovative and creative and also flexible.
Maybe it's time to forget profit.
And not to forget profit, not profitability, but the balance on your sheet. I mean, you need financial support to proceed and
How to
finish
shrink the debt is more reasonable thinking, probably.
Without committing the exposure, publicity, and attendance. And how can you, cater to the interest from potential sponsors? I think we need a swap. We need to completely change, what you will get, where you get the money from. Because over the past year, who are making money and who are losing? And the traditional sponsors might be suffering and struggling themselves financially already. And those making bigger money, like the tech giants and also financial organizations, and they may serve as potential sponsors and supporters for the Olympics or any huge event like this.
And also another big question hanging over our heads is Beijing, 2020 Winter Olympics. President Xi inspected the preparation work just yesterday, but how are the prospects for Beijing Winter Games, Dongjun?
First, we should wish Tokyo good luck because financially, again, sponsors would take into the Tokyo Games and then the Winter Games in less than 2 years together to arrange to make their financial arrangement. And now, if Tokyo is in question, we cannot be sure to predict that there will be more sponsorship or even less. We don't know yet, and now we are not sure about how many athletes from other countries, no matter how well we are prepared, how successful we control this round of pandemic. And all the facilities, conditions, and even the fans are more ready than ever, including the skating and skiing fans in China, in northern China. But we have to make sure that enough athletes from around the world will be able to come. And that's a question that nobody can answer yet. But I like the prospect of potential sponsors being interested in the ever-increasing population of Chinese winter sports fans, even during this ongoing winter. Their enthusiasm about the very new sports on the slopes, on the skating rinks is still so hot and so strong.
So it is a fluid situation, but one thing is for sure, sports has been played differently in 2020. And Yanqiang, all sport was canceled for several months last year with domestic leagues returning in bubbles behind closed doors. And you earlier said that the American Basketball and European Football League was still going on, but differently. So you think how long this format will be the norm? Probably sport will be changed forever from now on?
Temporarily, it is so, and I don't think it's a sports challenge. It's a kind of social challenge. It's a pandemic challenge. If the overall circumstances do not go back to normal, we would not anticipate more in-stadium spectators, among all these different leagues. But there's another point I want to make. This is a sports program, right? And thanks to Tokyo, we have the Beijing Winter Olympics will have a kind of bumper line, before us as a kind of testing event. But talking about athletic achievements, I would anticipate, great results from the China delegation, whether it's Tokyo 2020 20 Summer Olympics or the Winter Olympics, because compared to other nations, our sports system has a better preparation or adjustments, to this challenge. Our teams are still training properly, and our athletes are still dealing with this challenge, with help, a very strong help from the sports administration. So this could be our competitive advantage in facing all these coming events, if they're coming.
Yes, indeed. And Dongjun, earlier when I talked with our editors, we argued whether athletes should be entitled to special treatment because of Olympics, getting through immigration or access to different places. What do you say?
I think for people such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and many other countries, I think the pandemic is the overwhelming challenge, and the situation is very complex. And who will be, first or earlier in the line waiting for vaccination is a social or even political issue. And I think athletes, as young people, most of them are very young, and upcoming obligations will be attending or representing their country to attend the Olympic Games. Would that, be legitimate enough for them to jump ahead of other citizens? I'm not sure about that.
And also, in the time of COVID, how can we, as audiences and as professional players, make the most of it? What technologies and tools are there that can let us still enjoy sports? Yan Qiang?
I've witnessed a boom, online for all kinds of lockdown training, individual practices throughout the year. There were so many resourceful things that we can take, through all these platforms online, using all this technology. We've been regular users of Zoom, of all kinds of new dialogue methods. So I think it's not that a bad thing for us to adapt to these new technology tools.
And Dongjun, do you see any bright side of playing sport in 2021?
Oh, absolutely, yes. And I think back in last year, 2020, we've already built up quite some experience and experimenting the bubble style, the format, and the technologies. All of a sudden, they were introduced and they were learning. There were a lot of machine learning, and there is so much room for improvement, and technology can catch up, can play bigger roles. And also at the same time, with or without the pandemic, we are using technologies to innovate. We do sports, because the way we do sports over the past century or decades have never been in a stale pace, but rather they have been moving forward. It's different. Without the pandemic, it's different from 10 years ago, 5 years ago. So I think we're just pushing ahead more, quickly, fast.
Well, probably that makes sense. The Olympic model in the year of COVID, be stronger, faster, and higher. We should probably live on and hang on with our life. Thank you very much, Yan Qiang and Dongjun.
Thank you.
And you've been watching Dialogue here on CGTN. I'm Zhu in Beijing. Thanks so much for watching. Goodbye.